Hello everybody and welcome to another Unity game development video. Today I'm going to be talking about something that's kind of important to consider when you are making your kind of hit detection scripts and bullet behavior, and that is redundant calls to the functions that apply damage to your enemies. So I could shoot a character in a hitbox like this and it'll do damage, and I could shoot them in the head and there's a headshot multiplier. Um, but what if I hit them in both sections of their body with the same bullet? What if I shot directly above through the head into their body? It would hit both hitboxes, but we don't want it to apply damage on both of them. And we want it to prioritize a kind of damage profile that is using the head multiplier. So we want it to hit the character once and find out did it hit anything critical like a headshot and only apply damage with that headshot multiplier going on. So if I walk over here to this enemy and I stand above them and I shoot directly through their head into their body, it should hit their head, apply the headshot multiplier, but it should also hit the body but not add the damage on again. So we're only going to hit it, add the damage, and use the headshot multiplier. We're not going to hit both hitboxes and actually use them. Well, first, I think it would make sense to establish exactly how many shots it takes to kill an enemy. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 bursts to the body. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 bursts to the head. So if I stand above this character, it should take 4 shots to kill them. And it did. So I'm shooting through the head into the body, and it's only applying the headshot damage. And I can show you exactly how that works, and you might think that's not that interesting, but this is working with a bullet script that also handles penetrations. So if I look at enemies like this and I line up a few shots, it's actually hitting each of these enemies and detecting the individual hitboxes and applying that headshot multiplier to each of them. So that's important because it could get overly complicated quickly if you're trying to do something like that multiplier identification thing and multiple player managers at the same time. So I'm going to jump into the code and explain what I'm talking about. So we have an array of hits using raycast all, and I went over in my last video bullet behavior. You can check that out if you want to know how I'm kind of sending the ray from one position to another. That's not important for this particular subject though. If we go down, so we have a new list of player managers. The player manager script or component that I've attached to each of the players is simply that script that handles the health and the functions that affects that health, so the damage we get from the bullets. And we have a list of hitboxes. So basically, if you look at the player hitbox script, we have a public player manager, which is the parent object. It's not the actual physical parent object. I just am wording it this way because it's intuitive. So basically, we have a player manager on each of the characters, and we're assigning these player hitboxes to that player manager. And we have a multiplier identity, which in this case, if I type in head, it will apply extra damage for when we enact damage through the player manager. So if I go back to the bullet, so for each hit that we got from that raycast all, we are going to check for hits that have a hitbox. So if we're hitting something and it doesn't have a hitbox, we don't want to do anything with it. So if we hit it in as a hitbox, we are going to add that hitbox's parent object, which we just described as a player manager. So we're adding each player manager to this hit players list. And we're also adding the hitbox to this hitbox list. This line of code is not important here. It collapses, and it's just about the reflection of the bullets. If you're interested in that, I have covered that in a separate video. So we're going to take that list of player managers, and we're going to get the distinct elements of that list. So a distinct element is each time a unique element is there. So in this case, we have player 1 and player 2. And I'm going to show you in the diagram what I'm talking about. So here we have player 1, and here we have player 2. And we have a bullet passing through each of them. This bullet is hitting a hitbox on this player. It's being added to an array. It's hitting this hitbox, it's being added to an array, and that's going through. And for every time it hits a hitbox on this player, it is adding that player to a list of player managers. and then we're getting the distinct player managers from that list. So every unique item that shows up. So player one, player one, player one, player two, player two, player two. And then we know that there's only player one and player two within that list, so we make a distinct list of those. Okay, and then we're running a for loop through that hit players list, and we are saying for each player manager in the distinct players, so for every single character that is hit, not for every time the player manager is added to that original list, for every unique and distinct player manager we have in that list, go through that non-distinct player managers list. So we're going over here and we're taking these player managers and we're going in with each of these distinct players and we're going through the list and we're saying, hey, which of these player hits is related to this distinct player? So we're taking the distinct players and we're going through and looking at each of the player managers. So here is the distinct player manager one. What's going on with this part of the list? That is player manager one. So we're going to enact damage. And then we are going to go to the next one and it is going to check again. It's going to say, hey, this is the same player manager. So let me re-explain it through the code here to better emphasize what's going on after we reach the player. So we're running a for loop through each hit player, and for each distinct player manager, we're going to cycle through the non-distinct player managers. If the hitbox parent, which is the player manager tied to that hitbox, matches the distinct player manager, then we're going to enact damage on that character. If the damage identification thing says there's a head, we're going to take off the health from the head bonus. So instead of a multiplier, I actually have just a separate value that tells you how much health should be lost for a headshot. And that is being used in conjunction with the regular damage. So it'll apply the head damage and the regular damage at the same time. And it's important that we keep those separate in this particular instance, and you'll see in a second. So we're going to apply the head damage and the regular damage from the player. See here it is checking if the parent object or the player manager tied to that particular hitbox is not equal to this value here, or this variable, which is last hit player. And that is a player manager that we have set up here. And the reason we have that is so that we don't end up hitting the same character again. So we're getting PM, and if you remember up here, PM is that distinct player manager, and we're setting the value of the variable last hit player to that distinct player manager. So what that's doing is we have a variable to call on that tells us what the last hit player was. So as we run through again, it'll run for the second part of the non-distinct player managers, and it'll say, hey, this is the same as the last hit player, let's not add the damage. But just in case the first shot or the first hitbox detected was not the head, we are still going to be checking for that head. So you can see it goes through here, and it's only asking for the last hit player for the base damage. The last hit player is not being applied to the check for the head here. And that's important because, one, in this particular instance, the characters only have one head. I'm sure you could get around it if they have multiple, but we're staying a little bit more grounded in reality, even though it's a sci-fi shooter. So we don't have to check to make sure it's the same head over and over again. What we are doing is we're checking for the head even if the character's hit, because the head damage is separate. So we can run through these, and even if the last one is the head, it'll get the head damage. So the first hitbox will give damage, the second hitbox won't. And if neither of the first two were a headshot, the third might be the detected headshot. It might be coming from this angle, and that will give you the extra damage. Even if we are taking a shot from a different angle, or if it just went through the arm, body, then arm, we're just going to apply the damage once because it's cycling through all those hitboxes and checking if it's from that distinct player. The second player manager, we've gone through this entire player and then it hits it, and then we're going to run through the exact same thing again, except for this isn't going to match that last hit player thing. So we're going to go down there. It's going to check. It's going to say, is the parent or player manager tied to this hitbox the same as the player manager that is assigned to last hit player? It's going to say no, so it's going to affect the damage. and it's going to check for that headshot as well for that multiplier throughout. And if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But distinguishing and limiting that headshot detection thing doesn't matter because there's only one head per character. So we don't need to tell it to check if that is the head of player one or the head of player two, because those things are kind of embedded into these variables. So whether or not it's player one or player two doesn't really matter when it comes to the headshot multiplier, because that's just going to be applied passively as the damage is being acted on the character. So far the system works pretty well. It gets the job done. I can shoot multiple enemies who have multiple hitboxes, and it is only going to enact the damage described by the player manager. So it is distinguishing individual characters and individual hitboxes within those characters, which is very nice. So hopefully you found this video informative or interesting. And if you're creating a first person shooter, feel free to use this method if you'd like to. I spent a decent amount of time working on it, and I was very happy when it finally worked, because I spent like an hour coding it, and I said to myself, there's no way this is going to work. I'm going to have to go back and forth and fix this over and over again. But it worked almost first try, and the logic for it is pretty sound. It was kind of a this had to do some mental gymnastics to get that get the kind of logic of the loops running with the for loops and the nested for each and for loops within those was kind of a like a big puzzle for my brain. So um, I'm happy with how it turned out. I'm very excited about it. I don't have to worry about this particular system in the game anymore. Um, if you liked what you saw in the video today, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel. I'm going to be posting more and more dev stuff as I work closer and closer to creating a full first-person shooter that's potentially going to have multiplayer. And I'm very excited about this. Um, if you can, please follow my Twitter. It's at lowresdev. All the names between each of my accounts is pretty much the same. So if you want to find me on Tumblr, Twitter, Reddit, and all that garbage, it's all the same thing. It's lowresdev with no spaces. Thanks for watching. If you want to put a comment in the bottom, if you have any particular questions, if you want me to try and work on something in particular that you want to see or you have any trouble with, I can try that. But I think that's about it for today's video. Thanks for watching.